Again, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Hackensack City Hall. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Von Rudenberg.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Canestrino.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sims is absent. Councilmember Battaglia.
Here.
Mayor LaBrosse.
Here. Would everybody
meeting-
please, oh, go ahead.
This meeting is being held in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6 et sec. Notice having been published according to law with a copy on file in the city clerk's office and a copy posted on the bulletin board in City Hall.
Thank you very much. Would everybody please rise for the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to turn it right over to the city manager for his agenda.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council and invited guest. This is the Council of the Whole meeting for January 8th, 2019. For all those, Happy New Year if we did not see you before. And tonight, first on the agenda is the vacating of Caruso Street and Kenneth Street. And from the law firm of Alampi and Damaris is Thomas Lodato. Mr. Lodato would like to make a brief presentation to the Mayor and Council.
Mayor, members of the council, good evening. My name is Thomas Lodato. The firm is Alampi and Demarais, 1 University Plaza, here in Hackensack. We represent Maisano Construction, which is a business entity located at 215 Aline Terrace here in the city. It's been at that location for many years. My client owns a parcel which is approximately 1 acre in size. It fronts on Eileen Terrace, Kenneth Street to the east, and Caruso Street to the south. There is a three-family house which is in the southwest corner, which does front on Polifer Road, which about a year ago came under the ownership of my client. It has been vacant ever since. And Caruso Street really serves and has served one purpose only, and that was to give access to that three-family house. Now that the house is vacant, and in fact my client intends to demolish that house, there really would be no purpose, no continuing purpose for Caruso Street. My client, his intention and desire is to, and by the way, a representative of my client is here tonight, John Maisano. Their intention is to demolish that three-family house and to erect a storage facility for its equipment on site, as well as a parking deck above that storage facility. The parking deck would serve to provide employee parking, which is currently, their employees park on various surrounding streets. And that would obviate the need or the continuing use or purpose for Caruso Street. For that reason, my client is seeking the vacation of that street. To the south of Caruso Street is the NJDOT. As far as Kenneth Street from Eileen Terrace to Caruso, that's the only purpose it serves. And if Caruso Street were to be vacated, Kenneth Street would have, from Eileen Terrace to Caruso would have no continuing purpose. My client would seek the vacation of that as well. It would enlarge their property and again create the square footage to erect a new building and additional on-site parking.
Okay.
And if you have any questions or comments on...
Well, I know there was criteria that usually needs to be met in order for this to be even entertained, and I think most of the criteria, from what I see, so far has been met. But
Well, my biggest concerns are, and we've been talking about this for a while, is we've really been looking at different remedies to the traffic problems that we see on Polyfly,
Right.
and working in conjunction with DOT for something in the future. There's been another prospective project that's been proposed in that area, which we know would be contributing to the traffic in that particular area. So my concern would be to make these decisions before we've addressed some of these issues that we know are out there as potential problems.
Right.
That would be the reason that I would be opposed to doing this at this time. Not to say we wouldn't be open to do it once we resolve some of these issues, We've also talked in general at looking at that whole industrial area and, what are we going to do as far as zoning and encouraging economic growth within the city? And I think part of that might also look to do some reconfiguring of traffic within the city and working in conjunction with NJDOT and some of the other developers that may be looking to do more industrial, commercial type development there. So I think until we get our arms around what it is that we're going to design, our vision for that particular area, and our vision for helping offload some of the traffic, as you know, it's horrific there on Popfly. I think my vote would be to hold off until we have a better plan for that, and it may or may not use some of this property. So that's my concern.
All right, well, it's something we need to look into. Good point.
I mean, we'll certainly review everything that you have, but I'm being open and honest with you.
Understood.
These are our concerns at this particular time. We're not there yet, let me put it that way.
I understand. Again, and not to argue the point, you'll have to satisfy yourself that Caruso Street and its limited width would help alleviate the flow of traffic. I don't know if that is the case, but we'll leave that to your analysis.
Anybody else? Leo, you got anything?
Anything, Leo?
I'm not that familiar with it.
So let's make ourselves, we need to familiarize ourselves a little with this, do some internal investigations with the city manager, through the city manager, and we will look into it.
Yeah, and if I may, just so you understand, the standard practice when we've done a few of these things is, we would expect to the extent that engineering or additional legal would be required in order to effectuate this, that you would be prepared to, put those funds into escrow and cover any sort of costs that might arise as a result if the council does decide to proceed. Obviously, at this point, we're not there yet, but I certainly would suggest to the council, if we are, that would be
Right.
part and parcel of any sort
At a
of
minimum, we have to do a
agreement.
traffic study, et cetera,
That's understood, and we anticipate that.
One of the things that I might suggest is, and it appears to me that you folks are serious about this proposal, is maybe you could come up with some conceptual kind of a layout, some kind of description of the building. So, we're basically at this point, at least for me, I'm thinking of a number, you're thinking of a number. I don't know if we're thinking of the same number. I use that as only as an example. But my point is that the New Prince Construction Manzano family is obviously entrenched in the city of Hackensack. Obviously, they've worked for the city, done construction in the city. So if you're going to proceed, it might be helpful to kind of lay this out, because right this minute, we're going to, delineate the use of Caruso Street and Kenneth Street. Maybe it would help for them to get some idea of really what this is going to look like and maybe what that would proceed. And in the meantime, we can start checking off some of the boxes of some of our own concerns and issues here in the interim. So maybe that'll help facilitate a
If we
little
could
bit.
get down
Just
to
a
Green
suggestion.
That's fair. Good suggestion.
Outlet and green.
we don't know.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
And of course, we appreciate you as being, good business owners and partners in the city as well.
Thank you.
Next is the tax appeal refund for 336 Prospect Ave. And we're fortunate enough to have our CFO, who will do a masterful job of explaining this.
Yeah, what I wanted to do was just explain this particular tax appeal refund. It is on the agenda for the business portion. And then just give you a quick update on where we are in tax appeals overall. Okay, this particular appeal affects 336 Prospect, Block 341, Lot 10, which is a nursing home. Now, we've got some experience with other nursing homes with the appeals that have been filed. We've seen the tax court judge and his rulings on nursing homes. This particular one, the appeal goes all the way back to 2011. From 2011 to 2018. During that period, they had a significant vacancy. We've had other appeals where there have been a significant vacancies. We have an idea of what the ruling would be if we did go to trial. So the assessor, the tax bill attorney, and the appraiser are all recommending the settlement that's on the agenda for tonight. And under the stipulations of the settlement, the appeals for 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 would all be withdrawn. There'd be no refund. And then the assessment would be lowered for 2017 and 2018, which would result in a tax appeal refund for this property of $250,000 for 2017 and $250,000 for 2018, which is a $500,000 refund. And we're recommending that settlement because of the potential exposure if we were to go to trial. Now, the reason I wanted to address the council on this is because $500,000 is an awful lot of money, and we're not financing. As you know, back in beginning of 2017, as an alternative to financing, we began budgeting for our reserve for tax appeals. So we have the money on hand to take care of this settlement, which is the way you're supposed to do it. You're not supposed to finance tax appeal refunds. Okay? Our reserve for tax appeals currently has a balance of about $1.2 million. Okay? So this $500,000 settlement won't be a problem. But just wanted to let you know that there are still tax appeals out there. Much as I wish I could say the tax appeal issue has gone completely away, it hasn't. Okay? It's just being managed properly the way it's supposed to, with funds that are budgeted as opposed to funds that were borrowed. Okay? Right. The reason I'm saying that is because, for a couple of reasons. One is we're getting into budget season, and we'll be looking to again add to our reserve for tax appeals in the 2019 budget. That's the first point. Second point is 2019 is the last year of our 5-year plan for the rolling reassessments. So at some point toward the end of 2019, we're going to have to take a long, hard look at what our next step is going to be. Maybe we want to continue reassessments, maybe we don't. Maybe we want to go to a full reevaluation. If we do go to a full reevaluation, and I'm not saying that we should or we shouldn't, we definitely need to look at it. We found from experience that we can't because our tax maps need to be updated. One of the things we'll be looking for in the 2019 budget, no matter what, is to take care of our tax maps, because that should have been done a long, long time ago. Okay? But main point was to let you know that yes, $500,000 is an awful lot of money, but we do have it budgeted. We won't be borrowing it. It won't be any impact to us, and we're able to take care of this.
I have a question. We are doing these rolling assessments, and these things had been challenged going all the way back. So my question is, why did the rolling assessments for 17 and 18 not take that into consideration?
Well, what happened was the assessment was changed in 2017, okay? But it wasn't changed taking the vacancy rate into account. And that's what the appeal is based on. It wasn't changed by a lot. It wasn't changed by a lot. And that would be my concern, Ted, that I think we should talk to the folks that are doing this assessment. As, you know, let's understand these things, thank God, don't happen that often. But they also, you know, they're on the hook for explaining to us when we have something that's this anomalous, that it's a $500,000 refund for 2 years. And, you know, it was obvious that this was being challenged before, you know, because it went back to, what'd you say, 2011? 2011 is the first year of the appeal.
So I would just, you know, make sure that we have a better understanding, and should the public also ask that question, that we're prepared to answer. I know that's outside of your realm, you know, from the, really talking about our tax assessor.
Got it. All right. Any questions, Mayor and Council? No. Okay, number 3 on my agenda was a discussion in reference to the landscape ordinance amendment. I spoke to Mr. Kleiman and communicated today that there's another issue that needs to be addressed. So we're going to table that for tonight and the next council meeting, which is January 29th, we should be ready to go.
Yeah, you know, I mean, the other thing I would suggest is if anyone came out here tonight with a specific reason to speak on this and can't come to the next meeting, that they be given some sort of opportunity to be heard. You know, if there are any other issues that need to be addressed that may be worthwhile.
So is there anything even worth discussing tonight, or you want to hold that off till the next CAL meeting too?
Well, as I said, from my perspective on the ordinance itself, I'd like to wait to discuss it, but I know it's been advertised. So, you know, certainly if we need to, we could, if there is anyone here specifically to speak on that, I think perhaps we ask. If that's the case, we can, you know, open up the public hearing and continue it to the next meeting to give them an opportunity to be heard if they can attend the next meeting or want to
Okay.
say their piece today. That's my only thought. I just don't want to leave somebody
Well, let's ask the public.
without an opportunity to speak on this.
You want to do the public hearing at the council, when we bring up the,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is when we come to
When we
the
get
actual
it
meeting at
done.
8 o'clock, if there is anyone here who wishes to speak, we'll open it up, have the public hearing, let them speak. They can always come back 2 weeks from now. If someone has a piece to say on this today, I think it would only be fair to give them a chance to be heard so that we can take that into account. That's all I'm saying.
that makes sense.
Okay. Number 4 is a discussion reference to the limousine ordinance amendment. The city of Hackensack is basically raising the fee.
Actually, we're not raising the fee for the limousine. What we are doing is we are having it harmonized with the current state law on it. So we're actually applying the fee that is established by state law
State,
for
okay.
limousine
the state
ordinances. There's
statute.
been some changes in that statute over the years. Our ordinances have not really, kept up with that. So what we're doing is really harmonizing our ordinance with the current state of New Jersey law. That's what the purpose of this is.
Is the limousine ordinance, the fees are a lot less than the taxi ordinance?
Yeah, I mean, the limousine ordinance, the fees, well, first of all, the limousine ordinance only covers,
$50 per vehicle.
it's $50, and you have to have your principal place of business within the city of Hackensack. So it doesn't
Then
even.
it's only $10 a vehicle. I mean,
And then,
the
it, and then,
taxis
and then
are a
it's
lot more,
$10
right?
a vehicle. Because, the anticipation is that limousine companies tend to not be located within a particular community, where taxi cabs, you can regulate them so that they can only be, essentially hailed in the town where they operate, versus a limo service. You might call up Hackensack A1 limo service to take you to Newark Airport if you live in, Rochelle Park. It's a different sort of business, and so the New Jersey statutes establish an entirely different regulatory structure for limousines. And again,
I guess my real question is, our taxi ordinance is okay, it's just a limousine ordinance that we have to update?
well, we perhaps the taxi ordinance is next to review. This came up, was a member of the police department who was involved in reviewing this, recognized that there were some anomalies compared to the state law, brought it to my attention, and we started researching it and figured out, okay, this is what we need to do to get us, to be strictly in compliance with what the state law is, because to the extent there's a conflict, that's a problem. We can always look and see if the taxi ordinance needs to be updated. I mean, this is kind of a constant thing. It's a constant battle, right? New Jersey, the legislature's passing new laws that affect us all the time, and we have, several hundred pages of ordinances, and trying to, put a finger into the dam and fix one at a time. It's certainly challenging, but whenever we do see an issue, we do our best to fix it as quickly as we can.
That was my other part of the question, is I was just curious, I mean, Ubers are like the new taxis, and yet, but there's no fee for those, correct?
Nope.
Anybody can, I mean, the state doesn't impose any fee, anyone can have do you have to have a special license
You have to
to
have
be an Uber
insurance.
driver? Just insurance?
No special license.
So,
Yeah, I mean, an Uber driver, that, again, it's like Airbnb. We've talked about Airbnb before and trying to figure out what makes sense to do, how to regulate, these sort of things. I mean, Uber is very tricky. I mean, most people who drive Ubers, if you look at your auto insurance policy, if they don't get a special policy, you have New Jersey manufacturers. I just renewed mine. It has a big thing, ride sharing. If you're ride sharing and you don't tell us, you're not covered.
but the city doesn't have to do anything,
At this point,
as long as we're covered.
we can certainly look and see what other places are doing with respect to Uber, if anything. But as of right now,
As long as the state doesn't require it, and we're just not.
no,
aware of it.
the state doesn't requirement. I mean, I think Ubers probably could be regulated within the city if that's something that we wanted to look at doing further. But again, it's still a bit of a cutting edge situation where these things are fleshing themselves out and trying to figure out, what to do without, getting rid of Uber service that a lot of people may like. That's the challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Number 5.
Okay, number 5 is a discussion of the resident parking ordinance amendment. The city of Hackensack, under ordinance number 02-219, to permit certain residents of Essex Street to obtain resident parking permits. And those changes are resident-only parking permits shall be provided to the following residents residing on the westbound side, parentheses, north side of Essex Street as it follows, and addresses 424, 426, 440, 450, 486, 490, 500, and 520 Essex Street, which shall be authorized these residents to park on the street regulated by the residence parking program that is enumerated in section 170-71E 1. Foregoing shall not be construed to allow parking on Essex Street at any time. And that's what's proposed. Any questions?
None.
Makes sense.
Okay. Number 6 is an amendment to the ordinance for 170-13 truck and trailer parking within the city. And there are numerous changes of 170-13C, 170-13D. Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I don't think this one's actually, I think this is just up for discussion tonight. I don't believe
Yes, sir.
it's physically on the agenda. But I believe it's just simply to give us additional authority when trucks are parking in residential areas when they shouldn't be to address that issue, recommended by, I believe, the constable.
There's also a concurrence from our police director. And maybe he has a
He may
few
have.
shining words, if at all.
Well, as you two guys presented, that's really all we're looking at doing. We're not changing anything that's on the record or on the books as far as what can or cannot be parking where and what can be towed and stored. We have all of that in place. It's just allowing a constable as a force multiplier to go ahead and enforce by way of summons those violations as well. And that's what we went ahead and did here.
Okay.
So that would be on for first reading at the next meeting. There was a couple technical questions that we were, I think, discussing internally that we wanted to resolve before we put it on. So, you can anticipate that in 2 weeks.
If there's no questions, I'll move to item 7. Item 7 is the discussion of community gardens resolution. The community garden concept is being directed and certainly supported by council members and through the efforts of Stephanie von Rudenberg. And the first suggestion was to have one of these set up in Johnson Park. We have a greenhouse there. Obviously, we have conditions and material there that would be conducive of starting there. So there is a proposed, community garden resolution to establish a community garden at the Johnson Park. And we will basically, it says, the city council hereby authorizes a community garden in the city property in Johnson Park immediately south of the city greenhouse in the general area indicated on the attached map. Environmental Commission and the Department of Public Works to develop a plan for implementation and development of a community garden and to establish a suitable rules and regulations for its use. So this is to basically get started with, no pun intended, the shovel in the ground for the city to really adopt the concept of community gardens and pursue that, which I think is a positive step for the community and certainly for our residents. Any questions?
None here.
Okay. Moving on to number 8. Number 8 is the stigma-free ordinance. It's the reintroduction of the ordinance and reducing the minimum number of members to 10. This should be okay with the council and the committee because the problem was that the number was higher and they didn't have enough for a quorum to make this work. So we realized that the stigma-free group and their efforts need to be able to have meetings that are positive, that actually produce an action plan or some development of assisting residents or people that are identified under this. So the new number is to get them to make the board 10 members.
Well, actually, it would be a minimum of 10. You could
I'm
appoint,
sorry.
you could appoint more than 10. I think the intention, and I had gone over this with our health officer at some length last week. The intention would be, I guess the board had been created by resolution. There's no ordinance on the books dealing with stigma-free, but there had been some resolution, and this was to codify it. You'd have a minimum number of 10 with the anticipation that the folks who are currently on the board would be essentially the holdovers, and then we would have an appointment process to formally reappoint them through, through this ordinance, and it would be a little bit more formal going forward. But it certainly wouldn't require, to the extent there are more than 10 people on the board, if you wanted them all to stay, they certainly could all stay. And we kind of designed it based upon how many appointments you're going to make, so that you can do it in a fairly easy and comprehensive manner to get the board formally appointed. It'll start off with staggered terms, and then everybody will have 3-year terms. So the whole board won't turn over all at once, and you'll just have to determine who would get the 1-year, 2-year, and 3-year terms, and then the board would proceed from there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no questions, we move on to number 9, which is the Hackensack PD narcotics map. The city of Hackensack, and they have drug-free school zones that people have heard of in the past. Apparently, all the due diligence and all the necessary requirements of a drug-free school zone has not been established. Through the efforts of Mr. Kleiman, our police director, and our municipal prosecutor, we have now determined all of the requirements, and the last remaining requirement is for one of our engineers to sign off on the mapping that determines that. That has not been completely facilitated. I spoke to the engineering firm of Darmafowski, and they will complete the review, and if it meets all the requirements and contingencies established, we will present that for final approval on the 28th meeting. So I'd ask to have this basically tabled till we can just finish this last little component, and then the city will be completely compliant with this requirement, which has not been established in the past.
So we're going to pull the vote on that too?
Yes.
It's not.
Oh, it's not on?
It's not
Okay.
on there, I
That's
already
not-
pulled it.
Yeah, and just to clarify,
For
so
introduction,
yeah.
but I just pulled it off the agenda.
And just to clarify, because I think this is also important for clarification, there were a number of New Jersey statutes that enhance penalties for drinking and for narcotics sale within a certain number of feet from a school area, but also from public buildings. So, your library, your public parks, including county parks. And if we adopt this ordinance, then that becomes the official map that can be used as evidence in a court proceeding, and it will have, have the city's blessing of approval, so it becomes easier for prosecutors to simply pull out the map. Simply because the map is not been updated, it's still fine. The prosecutor can still introduce evidence independently. It's just making things easier for law enforcement if a case like this comes up, that we have a map that has been reviewed and approved. We had a surveyor draft the map, but the statute requires that an engineer sign off on it. So we do have the map available. It's just the engineer needs to check it and make sure it's good to go. But the city's not in violation of anything simply because we haven't completed this. We're just trying, again, to make things easier for law enforcement, so when they have to prosecute a case, they don't have to independently have a surveyor draft a map or something like that. They can just pull out the city map, say, here it is, it's been approved by the council and the city engineer, and the court will accept that as evidence. And it's got a presumption of validity that a defendant would then have to bear the burden of trying to overturn. So that's the purpose and the benefit of adopting this, and updating this map and having it available to our police department and the Bergen County Prosecutor's Office.
Okay. Next is a discussion and amendment to the SRO agreement for Class 3 specials. The city of Hackensack is retaining what they're referred to as SLEO 3s. SLEO is an acronym for Special Law Enforcement Officer, and these officers are basically hired and retained to protect our children in school system. We've hired a couple, but unfortunately, we did not get the applicants that we really wanted to fulfill what we're committed to provide to the schools of the city of Hackensack. So the only way to attract people is to raise the hourly rate. So this is an amendment to change the existing ordinance from a minimum of $30 to $40. And these people basically work the school year and then their service ends. So they're not full-time, they're not requiring benefits. They're here as an added resource to keep kids in this community safe. That's where it starts, and that clearly is where it stops. So I'd ask the mayor and council to consider upping the fee in the ordinance from $30 to $40. Any questions? Next is a discussion reference to animal control contract with Bergen County. Bergen County is our provider for animal control services. Through that animal control services, we rely on them to pick up animals that are obviously loose and conditions of health violations, and they work in partnership with our health department. The Bergen County, basically, one of the things that you see these commercials about these poor animals that are in cold conditions and the ASPCA and make donations and all this. So to basically, for the enforcement end of that, the Bergen County provides animal cruelty. Under animal cruelty, they have basically now created, because they used to have a separate organization that did the enforcement part of it, is a municipal humane law enforcement officer, or the acronym, because everything's an acronym now, MHLEO. I didn't know what that was, but I had to look it up. So in either case, the county offered separate options to do so. The option that the city of Hackensack has selected is the frugal one. The frugal one is basically we're going to pay $1,400 a year under option 2, and we're going to have our own police officer trained who is going to be our MHLEO officer for the city of Hackensack. This basically memorializes the agreement with the county, and we will commence the training and pursue this. And I think that the city of Hackensack, under this agreement, will be well served. So we're not adding an additional employee, we're basically recapitalizing the efforts of one police officer who's going to basically serve as the clearinghouse and the investigator, that when these unfortunate conditions are created, that we investigate them fully and take the appropriate action. And they are obviously schooled in what the charges should be, so we make sure that when these cases do occur, that we get convictions and these people are punished appropriately. Last is a presentation by the Board of Education.
Do we want to open to the public first?
They're not ready. Why don't we open to the public on these?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
And
a
then
little ahead of
it's
myself.
7
Public, and
o'clock,
then
so
we'll
let's
get
give
it
them a few
turned
more
over.
minutes.
So anybody from the
Finished
public
early.
would like to speak?
You need to-
I need a motion to open to the public first, please.
Offer.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody from the public who would like to speak, please come to the podium, give your name and address to the clerk. You have 3 minutes.
Not on the Board of Ed stuff.
This isn't on the Board of Ed issue. That's going to be separate.
We'll let
People
them
from the Board of Ed
present.
are going to be here to present.
They're going to be here at 7. This would be on.
Victor Sasson, 261 Euclid Avenue. I lived on Euclid Avenue for 10 years, but my neighbors say the street hasn't been paved in 3 decades. And referencing the agreement with the Hackensack Hospital, where the hospital is going to be paying $4 million a year in lieu of taxes for how many years?
It's a 6-year agreement,
6 years.
renewable in 6 years.
Has there been any decision made what's going to happen to the $4 million? Is it going to go to tax relief? Is it going to go to paving streets like mine?
Okay, the city of Hackensack is currently in as our CFO has identified prior, I don't know if you were here for that part of the meeting, is that we're putting together the 2019 budget. During that 2019 budget, we have a goal-setting meeting and we identify this. Now, we get CDBG grant money for repaving of streets. Through the efforts of the council and our engineers, we have combined a list, and if memory serves me right, Euclid is one of the streets that's on that. If you give me your name, I will, and telephone number, I'll verify it tomorrow and call you.
Okay.
But there are many of the streets
Sure.
that we're going to address. So we are addressing those needs, we just have not completed it. And obviously, the budget will tell us how far we can lean forward as far as making improvements under our infrastructure. But obviously, we're in discussion right now of getting ready for pothole fixes, which are obviously going to probably start in March. Hopefully, winter will be over, we can all pray, and that we will fix the potholes and move forward.
And then my second concern was when you have a situation on county roads, for example, I think 2 years ago I mentioned to you, Mayor, about the lack of turn lanes on Passaic at Summit Avenue.
Passaic and Summit, that's a
You said that
county
was-
intersection.
Yeah, so,
I mean, we can apply to them to try to do it, but it's totally their decision. But I think you were looking to get, there is a left-hand turn lane at Summit and Passaic.
well,
From
on Summit there are turn lanes, but on Passaic,
Passaic, there's
there are
not.
no turn lanes.
Yeah, I don't think the
in either
road's
direction.
wide enough, that's the issue.
Isn't there something called eminent domain? I mean, can't they
Well, it's
condemn
kind of hard in a narrow quarter like that to take people's
sidewalk?
sidewalks away. But,
There's a similar bottleneck at Passaic and First Street, where you'll have cars, 10, 20 cars backed up because there's no way to get around the turning vehicle from Passaic onto First Streets.
Right.
Anyway,
So what we do in the past is we petition, we take the information and the request that you folks make, and we basically forward that petition to Bergen County and ask them, but obviously there's no leverage we have to force them to make these improvements.
Okay. So you're going to wait for the presentation from the board?
Yes, and then we'll open it again to
before
the public.
Has the council stated their position on the school bond?
We're going to allow them to
Oh,
present first, and then we
okay.
will all have time for discussion about that, just to be fair. We told them 7 o'clock because we assumed we would take longer, and I guess we got through it pretty quick, our agenda, Ted. so.
The last thing I wanted to talk about was the hospital now is going to be building 2 more buildings, I believe, a 300,000 square foot tower that was approved by the planning board, and a separate building for the utilities.
Yes, they were 2 separate site plan approvals,
Are
correct.
both of those going to be tax exempt?
That discussion will take place when we relook at the host community agreement after they're built. At the construction of the second building is going to be a 4 years worth of construction. So once it's totally identified that the new host community agreement really covers all of their properties, talks about what's taxable and what's not taxable. So once we have new properties, then that would be revisited in the same way. And that was one of our main objectives for having such a host community agreement, that we had a uniform way of identifying and examining each and every parcel that was part of the hospital proper.
Thank you very much.
Sir, if you want to give me your, I'll call you tomorrow.
Anybody else from the public like to speak? Seeing none, motion to close to the public?
Offer.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess.
You can talk about what the others.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Layla Amir Hamza. I'm a resident, a homeowner here in Hackensack on Palafly Road, and I am also a trustee for the Board of Education. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the Board of Education to do a very quick version of our presentation, which we are doing and have been doing at town hall, informational town halls across the district, including one that's actually going on right now at the Logan Center at Mount Olive Church. I would invite any of you who have more questions, would like to see the presentation with much more time to ask questions, to come to one of our 2 remaining town halls. We have one town hall that's actually going to be next Tuesday, January 15th at 7 p.m. at Hackensack High School on Beach Street, as well as one that is on at Jackson Avenue School on Wednesday, January 16th at 8 p.m. On Jackson Avenue. So For anybody who would like to attend one of those town halls, please make sure that you attend one of those 2 remaining sessions. You can also find a copy of this presentation. If you'd like to look at this presentation, you can get a copy of this presentation by going to our referendum website, which is hpsreferendum.com, and you'll see that at the bottom of this screen here. But thank you very much to the council for letting us come back and present again. This is an expanded presentation, some more information from the original one that we had done, but we're going to try and go through this fairly quickly. So this first slide here, obviously, these are our schools across the district: Nellie K. Parker, Fannie Mae Hillers, Fairmount School, the high school, the middle school, and Jackson Avenue School. One of the things that makes our community, our district, so wonderful is that we have this great history in our district. But unfortunately, our wonderfully historic buildings are also very old, on average about 100 years old. And that means that a lot of those facilities are really no longer suitable in terms of infrastructure and environments for today's learning. So this just gives you the age breakdown for each school. Our newest school was actually Nellie K. Parker, built in '74, over 40 years old. This slide, it's fairly difficult to see here, but this is really a timeline of all of the work, the major work and capital projects that have been done across the district over the years. And really, what's important to note is that there really has not been any major capital project here in the district since the 5-6 school addition was built back in 2000. More recently, we've had to address some big projects due to emergency repairs, including returfing our football field, replacing boilers at the middle school and the high school, partial roof replacements at the middle school and the high school. But this just gives you a timeline of the major work that's been done over the years. So I know one question that a lot of folks have had is, why is the district moving forward with this plan? Why now? It's really important to understand, I cannot emphasize enough, that we do have very old buildings. And those old buildings require a lot of work. Another huge concern, and is the reason that we cannot just simply address the aging buildings, is that we have a huge overcrowding issue across the district. In the last 10 years, nearly 1,000 additional schools have been included, or our enrollment has increased by nearly 1,000 students in the last 10 years. And of course, educational and security needs have also changed over the years. And regular maintenance as part of our annual budget really makes it difficult for us to address needed repairs. And so we've been forced to do everything in a piecemeal way. As a result, the district is coming to voters and packaging this referendum. And this referendum, I should say, because of the way that we've packaged this proposal to the state, the Department of Education state aid is available, more than $41 million in state aid. And that state aid is not guaranteed if we were to postpone this referendum. Again, it's important to understand how we got to this plan. We've been working on demographic studies for this plan since 2013, which has been updated annually as concerns over spacing and capacity have continued to increase. We have a subcommittee that's focused solely on buildings and grounds and long-term facilities needs. We have been touring all of the buildings with engineers, with all of our administrators to go over the needs at each facility, at each building across the district. We've also, over the past year, year and a half, been soliciting information, feedback from members of the community, parents, students, teachers, administrators, and all faculty to determine what are the biggest needs, both on an educational level and a facilities level over the past year and a half. We did more than 40 presentations across the district and received over 1,000 completed surveys in the last year. Based on the feedback and identified needs, various scenarios were considered. I know a lot of people have talked about in the past, why can't we just build, for example, an early childhood development center? Because our needs are so great across the district, across every age group, this is really the best plan that will address most of those needs. Again, overcrowding is the biggest concern that we have at this time. you can see here that because we currently don't have space in our schools, we've had to use our existing cafeterias in Jackson Avenue School, for example, as a music room, as a makeshift music room. We've had to partition closet storage areas for additional space. We have actually tried to subdivide space across the district in every way that is legally permissible by the Department of Education. And that's something that's really important for everyone to remember, that the building, the spacing needs of any educational facilities are very different than any type of regular development, whether it's municipal, whether it's residential, commercial. For educational purposes, we have to follow the Department of Education guidelines. This slide gives you information on our projected district enrollment, and you can see that our projected enrollment for this year, for 2019-2020, is 5,763 students. We actually met that number back in November of 2018, and we know that our city is continuing to expand, continuing to be redeveloped, revitalized across the community, so we have to be prepared as a school district to ensure that we can provide quality 21st education to all of the students as the city continues to be revitalized and redeveloped. Again, the Early Childhood Development Center, one important thing for folks to know about this building, that's at the old Padre Pio School, near St. Francis Church. That's a space that we currently lease. We are renting that space. And in 2013, we started leasing that space to get additional space for our preschool education because we didn't have the capacity to provide it with our existing facilities. Unfortunately, we're spending over $700,000 a year in rent for that space. And that's not space that we own. It's going to the Archdiocese of Newark. And anytime there are repairs, whether it's a boiler, whether it's carpeting issues or any type of plumbing issues, the district has to pay those costs. So this is a huge drain on our resources, and it only services 279 pre-K students. This is a fraction of the number of pre-K students that we have across the district. And I'm sure everyone will agree that preschool education is critical to learning across a child's school lifetime. The reason that building an ECDC, a new early childhood development center, is not an option, or continuing to lease the ECDC is not an option, is that, again, it costs $700,000 per year. We've exceeded more than $4 million in our costs since 2013. And the building itself doesn't meet all state pre-K requirements. We continue to get waivers to use this space. So we really, this building is not serving our needs. Again, this is really just highlighting the needs of all of our buildings, our aging buildings. Most of our spending on an annual basis focuses on education. And as we said before, we're constantly forced to deal with emergency repairs, infrastructure repairs on a piecemeal fashion. And that requires constant maintenance when you're dealing with such old buildings. The big projects that we have address heating, ventilation, air conditioning or HVAC systems, ADA compliance and updating building electrical systems. Those are all too costly for us to address with our annual budget. By packaging all of these costs for a bond referendum, we're able to qualify for the maximum 40% state aid in terms of renovation costs. And if we don't package for a bond referendum, the taxpayers would bear the full cost of the project because we may not receive the same amount of state aid in the future. Again, not only do we have facilities needs, but we have educational programming needs. And providing our students with a quality 21st century education is the most important thing for all of us as a district, along with their safety and security. In order to make sure that we meet the needs, we have to have sufficient facilities and space to provide science, technology, engineering, arts, and math learning, labs, maker spaces, blended learning spaces, smaller class sizes, more collaborative learning spaces, and small group instruction. All of those are part of a 21st century learning model. And so these are issues that a lot of parents raised to us when we were doing outreach across the district. Security, of course, today's security needs are very different than they were 50 years or 100 years ago when many of these schools were constructed. Some of our facilities today, including Parker School, has a space that is really an open space layout. And that space doesn't provide the best security given the current environment. So we really need to address security needs of all of our schools. And that means that we want to provide for security vestibules, single points of entry across all of our schools. Again, we're only able to address things in a piecemeal fashion with our annual budgets, where we can address the security one school at a time each year in our budgets. So the proposed plan will allow us to reconfigure our grades so that we can address the best learning environments and provide for additional space across the district. It will allow us to alter, renovate, and improve existing schools. It's going to allow us to create a new junior high school, which will be on the current high school campus for grades 7, 8, and a special 9th grade academy, or a school within a school model in that junior high school. And we'll follow a smaller learning community model for grade 9 that will enable a smoother transition to the high school. So the reconfiguration of our grades, again, this really lets you see what we have currently. Right now, our ECDC, that provides for education for 279 preschool age students. We have our elementary schools, which are grades kindergarten through 4th grade. Under the proposed plan, the elementary schools will really become early childhood elementary schools. That will be from preschool age to 2nd grade. Our middle school, what is currently our middle school, which houses grades 5 through 8, will be transitioned to an upper elementary school, and that's going to provide for education of grades 3, 4, 5, and 6. The new building will be a junior high school that houses grades 7, 8, and 9 on our high school campus, and then the senior high school building will transition, the high school building will transition to a senior high school for grades 10, 11, and 12. Again, a key aspect of this plan is to bring back preschool to our community schools, our neighborhood schools. As we said, right now, ECDC doesn't give us the capacity to do that. We've been working with the city, which has been providing us and has given us some additional space at 39 Broadway, which we're currently retrofitting to provide some additional preschool classes, but we're still at capacity for preschool education. So by bringing our preschool students back to our neighborhood schools, that's going to help us to address that huge cost of ECDC building so that we can stop renting and repairing a space that doesn't belong to us. It will keep our youngest students closer to their own neighborhoods. It'll help us to meet the state requirements for early childhood education, and it will allow us to expand access to state-funded preschool. That's a huge piece that right now we are actually leaving money on the table because we don't have the facilities, the capacity to apply for the maximum amount of state aid or state-funded preschool. So by expanding our space, we'll actually be able to have access to some of those additional state dollars for preschool. And the elementary school improvements, I just want to point out that you can see a much more detailed list, a detailed breakdown of the improvements by each school, because each school has its own needs. If you go to that hpsreferendum.com, you can pull up a sheet for each school. But generally speaking, it will give us the resources to provide additional classroom space, improved restrooms, security upgrades, safer drop-off areas. That's a huge issue. Regardless of whether or not you have children in the schools, you know that around the schools during pickup and drop-off times, there's not enough space for safe pickup and drop-off. So that's going to help us to address that. ADA accessibility upgrades and electrical fire alarm system upgrades. And for both the elementary and high school improvements, as we convert the existing middle school to an upper elementary, we're going to have to obviously provide for a playground area for the middle school, which currently doesn't have that type of space outside, gymnasium upgrades, additional classroom space, labs for science, technology, arts, math, air conditioning, roof repairs, window replacements, and additional space for extracurricular activities. And the high school, by shifting the grades to a junior and senior high school, there's going to give us additional space, repairs, give us additional space for labs, robotics, and different technology types of classes. Again, the proposed junior high school, that's grades 7, 8, and 9. That school will provide for STEAM and science labs, a dedicated gym and dining, a 750-seat auditorium, a state-of-the-art media center, and again, that 9th grade academy, the school within a school, as well as opportunities for additional extracurricular activities, internships, and personalized learning. Right now at the middle school, we don't have enough space to provide for a lot of extracurricular activities or sports. This is going to give our middle school age, our junior high school age kids the opportunity to take advantage of additional extracurricular activities. This, just so folks can picture where this school will be, if you look in the top left corner, that's where the new 7 to 9 school site will be. There will also be, if this one campus is going to be housing both a junior high school and a senior high school, we're also going to have to provide for additional parking. So we're going to have to build a parking garage, so there will be a parking garage there as well. And fortunately, in a lot of our conversations with the city has been really generous in talking about allowing us to turf over the lower portion of American Legion so that we can extend our turf and re-turf that field so it's a multi-use field so that we're addressing any concerns that people have with the loss of field space. And we've also talked about making Comet Avenue or Comet Way a two-way traffic and expanding that street into the high school property, the junior high school property, so that it will allow for a better flow of traffic. And again, the athletic improvements, there are things that we've been discussing with the athletic director and our coaches. It will also provide for field house renovations, new turf, and better drainage to create multi-use year-round fields. And we have been, in our discussions with the city and meetings with the planning board, we've discussed how we can, as a district, help the city with drainage issues. So the engineers and architects have been working with the planning board to ensure that we're allowing for drainage throughout the field, throughout that area, that site, which will address some of the flooding issues in that area. And when folks have asked us, why build on the high school campus? Well, in our landlocked community, we minimize the loss to the city's tax ratables by only growing on property we already own. That's one thing. We don't want to interfere with the ratables, the tax ratables. Using district-owned property also reduces the cost of the project to taxpayers, because if we had to purchase a property, demolish any type of a facility on that property, that would only expand that cost. And building a junior high school on the same campus allows for shared services and a better transition for 9th grade students. So these few slides, this is really what we want to emphasize, and one of the biggest advantages of the way that we've packaged this proposal is that we were able to maximize the amount of state aid that this project is receiving. So for example, the new construction, that is $101 million, and we were able to receive the state-approved 14.05%, or double of what was expected. We were actually anticipating only about 6 or 7% in state aid for new construction. The alterations, the renovations, and the HVAC upgrades, we were given the state maximum for each of those. The only slight loss in the renovations category was state aid is not available for the field house because that is not an educational space. But otherwise, we received maximum state aid for each of those categories. So that gives us a total number of $41.3 million in state aid, about 24% of the project. And that reduces the burden on taxpayers. So the original construction cost, that $169.9 million, is reduced by that $41 million. And that total cost, it's important to understand that that total cost includes such costs as design fees, legal counsel, and contingency costs, and that represents the maximum the district could spend. So that's the ceiling for us. We obviously, in the second phase of this project, we cannot solicit funding for grants, for donations, corporate sponsorships, until we've actually had approval from voters that we can move ahead with a referendum. Once that happens, we would be able to apply for grant funding, for additional state aid, corporate aid, foundation funding, private donations, but that can only happen once this first phase, once a referendum is actually approved by voters. Again, just to emphasize, the maximum 40% state aid for building alterations, HVAC, and renovations, excluding the field house. We received double the state aid expected for construction of the new school at 14%, for a total of $41.3 million in state aid. After the state aid, the tax impact on a home assessed at $245,431, which is the Hackensack average, is estimated to be $308.66 per year, or less than $1 per day on the average assessed value. We also want to highlight that for seniors and individuals with disabilities who are income eligible, they should visit the State of New Jersey Treasury website to see if you're eligible for a tax freeze. And we just want to remind everyone to go out and vote on January 22nd. And we also, I know that there are some additional questions. Deputy Mayor had mentioned there are some additional questions, and so we definitely want to answer any of those questions. And again, I apologize for rushing through this. We really wanted to provide this in as efficiently amount of time as we could. But you can see this entire presentation in person by going to one of our next two town halls. You can also see it on our website, hpsreferendum.com.
And if you have a question, you can go to the website that's on there, and there's a Q&A section. You can put your question in there. The question will be answered, and it will be added to the list of Q&As that we're currently, it's an
Yeah, they have to stay. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for your presentation.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
We're open to the public to see what anybody has to say on
Yes,
this.
and I do have, just so everyone knows, I do have some flyers here with me today that I can leave at the table. So everyone, please take this information, and please ask us, ask us anything. We're here to answer your questions.
If we can't answer a question, we'll get the answer.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll let the public speak first.
Okay,
and then
thank
the
you.
All right, so I need a motion to open to the public.
But if you'll stay nearby in case they have questions.
Yes, sure.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
What are we going to make the time limit on this?
Has to
Because we
be
have
3 minutes.
business. 3 minutes?
Yeah, it has to
All
be.
right, you have 3 minutes. Anybody who'd like to speak on this, please come forward. You'll have 3 minutes. Give your name and address to the clerk, please.
Victor Sasson, 261 Euclid Avenue. I'm not clear. Does the state aid reduce the amount of the bond?
Yes.
But you want approval for the higher amount?
The state says you have to bond and you have to put the entire amount to the voting public. So yes, 169 will be there, and then we'll have the reduction of state aid, and on top of that, any additional costs that are reduced through efficiencies and whatnot of the construction will go back into paying bonds.
And is the tax impact figured on the lower number?
The tax impact is figured on the lower end.
Okay. So, one question that you didn't answer is, how did the board allow the schools to be so run down? Your budget has gone up in the last decade dramatically, and yet you let these old 100-year-old buildings, on average, basically fall apart. Now you're asking the public to repair them. And with the, you have all these HVAC improvements, but I see nothing about green energy. There's no solar panels apparently on these buildings?
The new building that we're considering building will have green space on the roof, and we're also going to be looking into putting solar panels on the parking
What
deck.
about the older schools?
The older schools, if appropriate, because don't forget, the older school buildings might not be able to handle panels. If they can, the architects will work that out.
Okay, just can you answer the question about why the board allowed these buildings to be
Okay,
neglected?
the board did not allow the buildings to go into a state of disrepair. It's just that at the cost of items, we've been capped at 2%. The city council's been capped, we've been capped at 2%. To replace one boiler is over $1 million. We're limited in how much money we can hold in our reserves. So we've just reached the point now where the repairs are starting to catch up. We can't do it with the existing budget.
I would like to see the bonding proposal split into two, with the older schools and then the new schools, so So at least you-
We get that question all the time. The reason why the bond was set up, the reason why the referendum was set up as a single question is because the need is across the district from pre-K all the way up to 12th grade to separate things out, and should the referendum go down in one section and not the other. So if you've approved the repairs, but we don't have the new school, making the repairs, we can't make the repairs because that means adjusting the buildings for the little children, which we can't move them in, which means you can't do anything. It has to be a continuous project, unfortunately.
Next, please.
I don't have any questions, I'm going to make a statement.
Sure. You get 3 minutes, sir. Give your name and address to the clerk, please.
Are they going to be here to rebut me? Because I follow them around, they follow me around at various meetings. I'd like to make a statement on my own. Okay, good. If I may. All right, Mayor and Council, I have been at this microphone several times before. My name is Martin Kramer.
There we go.
Okay? And each time I've opposed the referendum for the school bond, which is on for January 22nd. I'm a former Teaneck councilman and township attorney for many years, and I thought that Teaneck politics was rough until I came here and saw the politics of this Hackensack Board of Education. And I make it clear that it's not the politics of this mayor and council. Board of Education is separate. I met last week with the acting superintendent, several of her attorneys, and auditor. They asked me to come and meet with them, and I pointed out to them two things. One is that the Board of Education by law cannot advocate for anything having to do with a school referendum. It is illegal for them to put their thumb on the scale and say, vote for this. And that's what they've been doing. They cannot spend money. Those monies are public funds. They can't hire a public relations firm, which I understand that they have done. But I focus with my meeting with the acting superintendent on a mailing piece or a distribution piece that was given to me at a meeting, in fact, by this gentleman here, or maybe by Layla. I'm not sure who gave it to me. And it says the $170,000 includes interest and soft costs. And that's an absolute bald-faced lie. It does not. And after maybe 15 minutes of discussion, the acting superintendent admitted it was an error. Now, that's a $94 million error, a big oops. And that's if you listen to their figures. By my figures, it's a $264 million error. That's a lot of money and a lot of mistakes. I have a letter from Rosemary Marks, the acting superintendent, where she repeats the error. And she says, interest is included, so are soft costs. Soft costs are teacher salaries, things like that, which can't possibly be included in here, and nor can interest. The interest raises the cost, at least by their figures, and Superintendent Marks admitted it was $264 million. I think it's $318 million. And the reason that they're doing that is to tell the public that this bond referendum at $170 million, which, by the way, is one of the largest bond amendments ever done in the state of New Jersey, by far. You usually see a bond amendment of $30 million, $28 million, $40 million, $5 million, not $170 with interest, which is at least $264 million.
Mr. Kramer, your 3 minutes is up. We have a lot of people who want to speak.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'd just like to leave the copy that I was referring to of their
give it to the city attorney.
their fiction piece, which says that the interest is already included.
Mr. Kramer, you have to clear the podium and let the next people speak, please. Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, Bill Burzak, I'm in Hackensack. I have some figures that I just wanted to present to this board. What I'm going to read, the first group of figures is based on the Board of Education's 2018-19 public school budget. These are their figures. The budget now is $117 million. I'm rounding it out. The total district enrollment is 5747. If you do the math, it comes to $20,300 per student. That's what we're paying for, all of the Hackensack taxpayers. I looked up where Hackensack stood in our surrounding districts, so I went to the state of New Jersey, the Department of Treasury. And let me quote what they say. I took the effective tax rate. The effective tax rate is a statistical study that enables the comparison of one district to another district. This is the state's numbers. Hackensack's effective tax rate is 3.3. South Hackensack, that uses our high school, is 2.527. Maywood, that uses our high school, is 2.574. Rochelle Park, that uses our high school, is 2.4. They run 22 to 35% lower in their tax rate, which we're picking up the bill. The other surrounding districts, Paramus 1.48, Teaneck 2.87, Lodi 3.01. We're high. We're out of sight right now. We're the highest in the area. So the questions I have is this. Why does the Board of Education misstate our per pupil cost at $17,000 when the actual number is $20,000? Why does the Board of Education lease out our school space well below our cost? We're not getting that from Maywood. We're not getting even close to $20,000. Instead of charging them $25,000 so we can have some money for these things, they're giving it away below cost. Why does the Board of Education expect us, the Hackensack taxpayers, to pay for this huge tax increase alone while the other districts use our facilities? It's not right, guys. It really isn't. So I can ask myself, is this the reason why homes in our Fairmont district are really hard-pressed to sell for $500,000 when a comparable home in Paramus sells quickly for over $600,000? Why do the condominiums and the co-ops in Fort Lee sell a lot more than ours? Our tax rate is killing us, and this thing is not going to improve education. That's another thing. The board did not budget for cost overruns, and everybody in this room knows that there's going to be big cost overruns. So that means you guys are going to have to deal with it, and you guys are going to have to add to the municipal budget their cost overruns. How do you allow this group of people to so adversely affect our well-being by distorting facts and purposely misleading the public? All I can say is we got to count on you to somehow right this wrong, because this is not right.
Thank you, sir. Your 3 minutes is up. Thank you for your time. Next, please.
Thank you. Robert Grayson, I'm a resident in Hackensack for over 20 years.
Did you get that name? I'm sorry, Leonard.
Robert Grayson.
Robert Grayson, okay. You got that,
I
Allison?
just have a statement to make, and we rebuttal too, and this is after reading articles that have just been published, okay? In 2018, there was $697 million worth of bonds floated. That was among 26 counties. That comes to an average of 26.8 million. We are asking for $168 million. That is almost the entire of 26 counties in one shot, which is going to be a lot more when interest runs, okay? In addition, this gentleman in a presentation said that we have a population explosion in New Jersey. I told you then. Today it was first printed that the #1 state in the nation for losing people, primarily because of taxation, is New Jersey. Excuse me.
That's right.
Well, didn't you say?
Right. To save time, let's not go back and forth.
Right, exactly. The taxation, we have a problem here in the sense that we live in a city that has very little ratables. And when I moved here over 20 years ago, the hospital was small. It's humongous now. It's wonderful to have a big hospital. It's non-tax revenue. The court's huge. It's non-tax revenue. So as a result, a 2-bedroom apartment with no land has taxes that approach $10,000. That's outrageous. That's outrageous. Ramsey floated a bond. Ramsey, town of Ramsey, $42 million. East Rutherford tried for $31 million and rejected. I mean, we are losing people. I actually know people that are moving out of our apartment because they can't afford it, out of the house. And that's with a low mortgage. That's with a low mortgage. Forget the traffic. If you're on Summit Avenue at 3 o'clock and you're going to go someplace environmentally, everybody knows what that's like. Imagine what happens here. And from what I've heard, psychologically, I don't know of one school district that has a junior high school right next to a high school. Maybe I'm wrong. Because I've heard it's not such a great idea. Paramus one. I heard it's not such a great idea. I don't need background noise, please.
Thank you. Mr. DePasqua, please. No one's speaking when you're speaking, okay?
You know, all we're asking for now is to split the referendum. We understand nobody's going to argue whether it should have been done before or it should have been done before as far as fixing the schools that are needed. And I think even the gentleman that spoke before agrees with that, okay. But the arrogance of not splitting the referendum, of only giving us one choice, to equivocate to what's an average of $28 million to bring it to 170 is absurd. And all we're asking is that this be postponed, and a referendum be split.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Ma'am, you're next.
I'll try not to repeat what other people have said. Arlene Burzak, Overlook Avenue. I've been a homeowner in Hackensack for 30 years. I am a mother, a grandmother, and a retired teacher and guidance counselor. So I speak as an educator as well as a taxpayer that's strangling in Hackensack. In my experience, bricks and mortar do not necessarily improve education, and any professional educator will agree with me. I worked in Patterson for 10 years. They built some wonderful, beautiful new schools. The education in Patterson has never improved, and if anything, it has gone down over the years. So it's not bricks and mortar. The proposed new school is slated to be a junior high school, and it's sharing not only the campus, but some of the facilities with the current high school. As a mother, I would not want my 12 or 13-year-old child on the same campus as 16, 17, and 18-year-old kids. Furthermore, the proposed parking garage, it's going to be an ugly structure, but it's also going to be an enclosed parking garage. It's a recipe for unwanted activities by students, by adult students. And we all know, no matter how well guarded it is, teenagers can be very clever and very resourceful. There are also 450 to 500 students coming from other towns, and I understand Maywood is negotiating with Paramus to possibly remove some of these kids over to Paramus. They owe us about $1.5 million in unpaid tuition, which the board has not made them pay up. If these kids leave our district, there should be ample room for the kids who are here now. The new apartment buildings that are going up in Hackensack, they are 1- and 2-bedroom units. They will house very few children. Experience has shown that most of these kids leave the district before they go into the school system because the families are looking for larger quarters, for houses that are bigger, that have more backyard space, and none of that kind of housing will be built in Hackensack. It's not viable with the space that we have. So how does the Board of Education substantiate their future numbers? I think that's sort of a crapshoot. And I hear the bell, so
Yes.
I won't give you my
Thank you
last
very much
word.
for your time, ma'am.
But
Appreciate
thank
it.
you, Mayor, for standing with us.
Regina DePasqua, Parker Avenue. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to repeat anything anybody else said. The city asked the residents to bite the bullet for redevelopment. Now the residents are being asked to bite the bullet for the kids. That's what you said about Leo's soccer, Dave's arena. It's for the kids, all the kids, not just sports. You said your wife, you've been saying for years, we need a school now. Your wife is in a crowded classroom now. That's not even considering any new students. We need it now. My 3 sons are proud graduates of Hackensack High School. My 3 sons did very well in Hackensack. My son's a junior at Loyola, Maryland right now, doing very well. It's a good school, and you get out of it what you want. And some kids don't want. Some kids do. That is the nature of our population in this city. We're a city. We're not Paramus. We're not Maywood. We're not other. We're a city. And that's what happens in a city. And anybody, there's a lot of new faces here. They haven't been coming to council meetings. They haven't gone to Board of Ed meetings. They haven't been paying attention. And that's why people are surprised, because they haven't been paying attention. You didn't say anything about this until after the mail-in ballots went out, and I'm sure you started getting phone calls. But you supported it. You have members of the council who have been part of this conversation. The conversation's been going on for a long time. To ask them to change it now, stop it now, you're really impeding progress. You're impeding progress.
Disagree.
By doing that. You can disagree all you want, Mr. Mayor, which is what you put on the letter.
I will give you my reasons.
When do you take off that mayor hat, I'd like to know? Because you sent that letter. Yeah, you sent that letter. So it wasn't as an individual. You were the mayor sending that letter.
I can't help it if I'm a mayor and a taxpayer.
Excuse me, no back and forth?
Okay.
I get interrupted?
Make your point, Mrs. DePass.
I'm trying to, but you keep
interrupt
interrupting
everybody
me.
that speaks at that podium, so how dare you?
Oh, how childish
Nobody
of you, Mayor.
speaks from the back
How
like
childish of you, Mayor.
Nobody speaks like you from the back.
You are...
Nobody is as rude as you at a council
This is
meeting.
what we're dealing with. The mayor is a child. A child.
Okay.
A hypocrite.
Continue.
You are a hypocrite. Excuse me. Can you remove them? Can you remove them?
That's what I'm used to hearing from you, so please continue.
Insults are not allowed.
He's a hypocrite.
He's not.
That's my opinion. Wow, none of these people ever come to council meetings. They don't know what. They don't know. Oh, they don't care. It's one issue. Yeah, I get my 3 minutes, okay? Well, it's too late to change the plan. It is too late to do anything different. But it's...
I'm gonna give you an extra 10 seconds since I cut you off. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor,
Finish up.
you are a hypocrite. And I will continue on that later.
Okay.
You are a hypocrite.
Okay, and I'll explain why I'm not.
Oh, you poor thing.
My poor thing.
Grow up, people.
Next, please. Thank you. Please give your name and address to the
Am I going to need a
clerk.
bodyguard?
Ira Goodman, I live on Beach Street. I just would like to read a statement from Frank Belgiovanni. He's the owner of 140 Overlook Avenue and 140 Comet Way. Unfortunately, he's unable to have been here tonight because of a prior family engagement. So basically, he's owned this property since 2012, and he's developed it into 8 luxury apartments. It took him well over 2 years, several planning board meetings, and numerous notifications to all neighbors during the approval process. In reality, he was asking the city of Hackensack to allow him to develop and improve the property so we would get rid of the eyesore that the property had contained. He invested millions of dollars and designed the building so that each apartment had a view of Hackensack and the New York skyline. Taxes increased more than 5 times. If the referendum and the project go through, his property will be devalued, the rents may have to be reduced, and he won't be able to afford the mortgage payments. Had he known the high school plan earlier, he would have built a smaller building with less expensive qualities. But he didn't find out about the upcoming referendum until Ms. Sahelia Spaeth called him about 2 weeks ago to talk about this particular meeting where the members of the Board of Education would be here to present. He didn't receive any notice that such a mammoth project was being planned, and the only thing that the board members and representatives could say is that it was on the website, and at some point it was published in the legal section of the local newspaper. So his question is, why would a person that has no children and no school-age children go to the board's website? Or why would any taxpayer look at the legal section if they didn't know what to search for? Or how about the non-English reading members of the tax-paying public? How would they find out about the new tax bills that they're about to be faced with? So in 6 years, he hasn't received a signed letter, a single letter, notice, or postcard about what was being pushed through just 50 feet away from his property. So here are some of his concerns. Taxes. Taxes, as we've all just seen, will increase approximately $308 per year for a property that is valued at $245,000 and change. So that's one concern. His other concern is related to costs. Having been in the construction business since he was a young man, he learned a thing or two about construction budgets and cost overruns. So he's very concerned about such a large undertaking not really being able to be estimated properly with the kind of precision at this early stage without full and complete construction documents. He's concerned about the size and the layout of of this project, specifically, specifically the size of the garage. In terms of this garage being designed for 350 spaces, it will also create an area which will block a lot of the view that his building went up to afford people a view of the city. Concerned about traffic as well, especially if Comet Way becomes a two-way street.
Okay, sir. Thank you for your time.
I have a copy of this with you.
Thank you.
No clapping.
Next, ma'am.
Gotta know the rules.
Sarah Novello, Beach Street, Hackensack. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to probably repeat things that people have said. First is the cost overruns. We pay extraordinary high taxes already for a one-bedroom or two-bedroom condominium on Beach Street. These overruns and the cost of the extra taxes are probably going to price people out of their own homes that they've been living in for so many years. The garage is going to add to a lot of congestion. As you know, there's construction going on at Hackensack Medical Center over the next few years. So there's going to be lots of traffic on 2nd Street. Then there's going to be all this traffic on Beach and Comet. And our building is like right smack dab in the middle. It's hard enough to get out of the garage in the morning when the people are zooming down the street to get to Hackensack High School. The garage, I think, is going to be a eyesore. Number one, it's going to be a dangerous area because of the amount of cars coming and going. And then, as someone else said about students congregating there before or after or even during school, it's just, I think, too much for such a small, congested area to take on this amount of work. And then there's not going to be an open space, a green leaf, a slide of grass that's going to be seen in that whole area. What's wrong with the field that's there now? Why build it on top of a building? It just doesn't make sense. It sounds to me like somebody's really going to profit from all this, and that's what the bottom line is, that somebody's going to become very, very wealthy over this whole maneuver. And it's not going to be the average taxpayer that lives and works in and around Hackensack.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it.
Let's just see if anyone else wants to talk.
Anybody else from the public like to make a comment? Nobody else from the, let me close the public then. Motion to close to the public?
Offer.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye? Okay, you guys can rebut now.
Okay, and it's not really meant to be a rebuttal. It's really meant to provide some clarification to some misinformation. First, I would like to say that that $169.9 million, that's the cost that includes interest and soft costs during the construction phase. When you purchase a home, your purchase price, of $300,000, for example, and your closing costs, that doesn't take into account the amortization over the next 15 years or 30 years, whatever the life of that mortgage is. That $169.9 million is the cost of construction. It includes soft costs and interests, contingency fees, design fees, council fees during the construction phase. So it's really important for purposes of that clarification.
It's not true.
Well, you know, you can dispute that, Mr. Kramer, but
Mr. Kramer, you have it, we may have a chance to let you rebut, but let this young lady finish.
Leila, let me just,
Sure.
because I'm not sure if I heard you correctly. You said the 169 million does not include interest.
it includes interest accrued during construction. During construction. These are construction costs, the cost of construction.
It does not include the interest of the bond.
Not the interest of the bond over time as it amortizes, just as if you're talking about, but that is the same thing that would happen with any mortgage. That's what the same thing, no, if you look on the fact sheet that was handed out, it says during the construction phase, and that's the key. I mean, when you purchase a home, that's the same type of cost that you're dealing with. So, the second thing that I just wanted to clarify, with regard to municipal taxes and the amount of tax dollars that go towards our schools, taxable rates, Hackensack schools get about 45% of municipal taxes. So that is actually a smaller share of municipal taxes that go towards our schools than if you look at other municipalities in the area. So we're actually dealing with a smaller share of municipal taxes. Cost overruns. One thing that's really important for individuals to understand is that this project is not the same as a development that's done by developers for residential purposes, commercial purposes. This is a project, an educational project, which means that the Department of Education has to regulate and oversee everything. That $169.9 million, that's the ceiling of what we can spend during the project and for the construction of the project. And so I know that Mr. Cicchelli can also speak to the success in our previous referendum with regard to cost that the addition for the 5-6 school in the last referendum actually came under budget. And so school development projects are different than development residential or commercial development. With regard to the sending districts, Hackensack has a very positive relationship with our sending districts. We've made presentations to all of our sending districts, and our sending districts add to the diversity of our district. Without those 450 students, let's assume all of the sending districts tomorrow did not send their students to Hackensack, we would still have an overcrowding issue across our elementary and preschool age students. Overcrowding continues to be an issue with or without those sending districts. And what's that?
We're going to go to...
Yeah, and they do pay tuition, the sending rate tuition. And with regard to notification to the public, I do want to say that, you know, this, as I said, we've been doing outreach for the past year and a half. I just want to clarify.
I'm giving you 2 more minutes till 10.
Just 2 more minutes, okay.
Right.
And
then we're going to let the council speak.
Just to clarify, legally, a Board of Education, as Mr. Kramer said, we cannot lobby and tell people to vote one way or the other. We can only present you with information. We've presented information beginning our June 5th board meeting when we adopted the plan and moved forward. Our board unanimously voted to move forward with the resolution for the referendum. We've presented at the City Council before the Planning Board, and we've also had 6 town hall meetings in December. We have 3 that are scheduled right now, 1 that's going on now, 2 more for next week. We would love for the city to send out Nixle alerts about those 2 remaining town halls to help with outreach. And legally, we're not allowed to send out postcards the same way you can for an election because this, again, we can't lobby. We're able to send out informational postcards which will go to a number of individuals that our council approves, but that's our legal counsel approves. But okay. And if Mr. Cicchelli,
really, we can. It's 10 to 8. We have to.
We have a council meeting at 8, and I'm going to give.
You have to let us have the opportunity.
I'm giving you 1 minute. You have.
How come he gets to rebut? Wow, that's not fair.
Hey, shut up. Focusing again on the interest, the document that I showed you, which was handed out, says already includes interest and other soft costs. After I met with the Board of Education last week, they changed it and pulled out those words. The one they're handing out today doesn't say that. Ask your attorney what that means. That's an admission. They understand that they spread this around town saying that it was limited to $170 million, period. That's not true.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. All right, Stephanie?
May I ask one more question?
No, that's it, ma'am. We're done. Because we have a very crammed docket tonight at 8 o'clock
If you'd stay, 'cause we
meeting.
might have questions if you would. Thank you.
We're already going to be, still have to go in the back room. We have an 8 o'clock meeting, so we're going to be probably a half hour behind schedule.
I have
Sorry.
a statement. Let me be clear. Nobody on this council or Board of Ed wants improvements and renovations to our schools more than I do. My 3 children will reap 100% of the benefits of a new facility and renovations. With a combined 25 years left in the Hackensack Public Schools, I think it's safe to say that my family will absolutely receive a positive return on all of the proposed improvements to the schools. Currently, my 2 sons attend Parker, an open concept school, in which I constantly worry about their safety, so changing the layout and safety features of Parker is of utmost priority for myself and my family. As a parent who is involved in the junior wrestling organization in which we host our matches and regions at the high school, it is a constant embarrassment to have visiting teams and their families see our ancient and often unusable facilities year after year. For these reasons, I am in complete support of renovations and improvements and will also support a new facility if it's deemed necessary. I am simply requesting that we take into consideration several important unresolved factors that we do not have answers to as of yet. I am in full support of a referendum to help improve the quality of the schools and learning environment for all students, but I am simply requesting that we have finality on the following outstanding issues, as well as looking at better options for our students. Maywood requested a feasibility study, which is currently under review by the state, for the transfer of their students from Hackensack High School to a different receiving district. Although most people are of the opinion that Maywood will not have their request granted due to diversity criteria set by the state, we cannot be 100% certain until the state confirms. This would result in a reduction of approximately 200 to 250 students and up to 500 students if Rochelle Park and South Hackensack also pull out. As a Hackensack parent, my main concern is for the students of Hackensack. However, Maywood has been actively trying to pull their students out of our high school for almost 10 years now, and the restructuring of the schools as a 7th through 9 and 10th through 12th may just give them this out. As a parent, would you want to send your child for 1 year in a building with 7th and 8th graders that are all from one town and then have them move on to another building the very next year? What if Maywood, Rochelle Park, and South Hackensack family has a 9th grader and an upperclassman? They must get their children to 2 different schools at 2 different arrival and pickup times. I do not believe the state will look favorably towards this structure and may grant Maywood their request. The staggered start and end times are a must regarding traffic flow. Having additional 2 grades come to the same location at the same time would be chaos. 7th through 9th, 8th graders should not be intermixing with the upperclassmen. I am hoping that Maywood does not leave. Maywood's presence, along with the presence of Rochelle Park and South Hackensack, is not just felt at the high school level. Although some have expressed the opinion that if Maywood left, it would free up a lot of space. However, as a parent involved in many of the recreation programs in town, the trickle-down effect will be tremendous, and many of our inter-town programs will become non-existent. In addition to the multi-town involvement in recreation, it is also an important life skill to meet peers from other towns and navigate and get along together. The re-registration remains incomplete. I personally witnessed students and families getting off of New Jersey Transit buses and skipping into our schools. The same students I've seen last year, I still see to this day. I know this superintendent has been working diligently on the re-registration task, and I understand that we will never have 100% compliance, but I feel more has to be done in order to ensure that our student resources are not being jeopardized because of students that are not residents of Hackensack. An action plan which involves preventing access to school records, disallowing participation in sports activities, regular contact and home visits by the truancy officer are all necessary. More must be done to enforce the residency requirements. It is disheartening to think that the students of this community may lack resources, have a higher student-to-teacher ratio, encounter more traffic in the hallways between classes, leading to lateness and loss of instruction time due to non-resident students whose parents and guardians are not paying a dime towards pupil tuition. But I must admit, it is even more disheartening to think that the taxpayers of Hackensack will be paying additional monies on top of the yearly school tax to accommodate these students for another 30 years. I believe the re-registration process should be completed and the truancy protocol revamped and enforced more stringently prior to making room to accommodate possible non-resident students. The 3 through 6 central school and 7th through 9th junior high school is not conducive to learning and social emotional development of our students. Research has repeatedly shown that most beneficial grade span configurations are K through 8 and a 9 through 12 high school. According to the current numbers for grades 3 through 4, At a 20-to-1 student to teacher ratio, which is a large size class, we would have over 20 third grade classes, over 20 fourth grade classes, and just around 20 classes each for 5th and 6th grade, all in one building. Although I have always felt that this is a town more than a city, by having all these 3 through 6th graders in a central location, 3rd and 4th graders are still babies, in my opinion, that small town feel will no longer be. Another concern is having 3rd and 4th graders walk to the middle school from all parts of Hackensack. Right now, we have 5th through 8th graders walking, and now those grades will be shifted to more lower. In addition, we are not addressing the bottleneck in the middle school. It will still be 4 grades, and actually the numbers in grades 3 and 4 are higher than the numbers in 5 through 8, so the numbers will go up in the middle school. There's also been a huge initiative by the state to integrate more computer science into our schools, and actually the state is mandating that schools offer certain levels of computer science at the high school level. Grade bands for computer science are K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. Breaking the schools into the proposed configurations will not align with these grade bands. While our monthly meetings have proved to be productive and the lines of communication have become a bit more open, many of these concerns I have expressed here were not addressed, and I always expressed the view that I do not agree with the grade configurations proposed and would like to see the Maywood issue resolved and the re-registration process completed. Except for 2 Board of Ed members, none of the attendees have children in the school system, and varying administrators that have attended the meetings do not live in town, nor will their 8-year-olds be expected to walk across town to a middle school. As a parent of 3 school-age children, there are several different options that I think should be explored. After it has been determined that the residency check is complete and that Maywood would in fact stay, I feel there are some options that could be explored in regards to a new facility. Making the current 5 through 8 school a 5th elementary school. All elementary schools would be pre-K through 5. The new building would be a 6 through 8 and retrofit high school with a separate technology wing for the use of all high schoolers. This would free up technology space in the current high school to accommodate smaller size special education rooms. Or making the middle school a 6 through 8 school, constructing a pre-K and K early childhood center, and building a STEM facility next to the high school for the use of all high school students. Both of these options would bring pre-K out of the ECDC, which is a nightmare in order to receive more aid from the state. It would not break apart the traditional high school grades, thinking about AP courses that should be taken, varsity sports that 9th graders might participate in, and the general high school experience for 9th graders. It would provide a state-of-the-art STEM space for the entire high school that aligns with state standards, and you would not expect 8-year-olds to walk across town to the middle school location. This could all be accomplished on school-owned property as well. As a prior educator and an involved parent of 2 children, next year it will be 3 in the public schools, I am full support of the many renovations and improvements needed throughout the district, but I do not agree with the structuring of the grade bands proposed, and I do not agree with going forth with the new facility structure prior to completing the re-registration and prior to having a determination by the state on the Maywood feasibility study. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. Just for general information, both Stephanie and myself have been in attendance at monthly meetings since the summer with the Board of Education. So I want to make it very clear that anything that Stephanie and I are saying here has also been voiced to the Board of Education. So this is nothing new to the Board of Education. What we're trying to voice now is to take our concerns that have been given to the Board of Education and make the public aware of them as well. I'm going to try very carefully not to overlap what Stephanie said to bore you to death, and most of my questions deal in more of the financial arena anyway. Okay. One of the things that we've asked for since the very beginning is to look for a phased approach. There are 4 events: new construction, alterations, renovations, and HVAC upgrades. We think there should be 4 questions. The Board of Ed has said repeatedly that they're looking for public input. This is the best way to get public input. There are 4 questions. Many people will vote for all 4. Some people may vote for 2 of the 4, 3 of the 4. But now the residents and the taxpayers of the town have the ability to vote and have the ability to have choices and have the ability to get those voices heard to the Board of Education. The council has asked repeatedly for 1, 3, and 5-year plans, and primarily because that's what we've been doing in the city. You've seen the changes over the past 5 years here, and that's because we do short-term and longer-term planning. I think they're tired of hearing it because I say it at every meeting. But for example, when we came into office here, we saw every street in Hackensack needed to be paved. We couldn't possibly do it all in 1 year without killing our taxpayers. So you heard someone speak about a street being paved earlier, a half hour ago. Because what we do is we pick a certain number that we know is not going to adversely affect our taxpayers, and we work our way through it. We inherited a $30 million tax appeal when we came into office, right? We didn't let it hit the bottom line all in 1 year. And that meant a tremendous amount of work by our CFO, who is sitting in the audience, and myself, who basically had to go to Trenton 3 years in a row, practically on our knees and beg, Jim, to get $10 million a year so that we didn't adversely impact our taxpayers in a negative way. Our expectation was that the Board of Education would do the same. The slide that was brought up by Mr. Kramer saying that this $128,000 includes interest was very disturbing to me for many reasons. I'm going to listen to what they say, that it was a mistake. Admittedly, the Board of Education has been working on these plans for 5 years. And if the folks working on those plans for 5 years had no idea that $169 million is really a payback of $295 million by my calculations, I'm sorry, I'm closer to theirs than yours, Mr. Kramer, but that's the number that I can come up with. That to me is frightening. And it's not like they just left a word out. They purposely added the word with interest. And that is very, very disturbing and actually frightening to me, that the folks making the decisions for that type of money would make that type of mistake and publish it. So I hope anyone who has that information, I had another pamphlet, I don't know if it's similar to yours, but this one that was given out also had the incorrect information talking about the $169 million, including the interest cost. All right, a couple of my questions. All right, when I look at your numbers, so you have your total expenses and your state percentages. All right, first of all, let me clarify, in no way am I a Board of Education expert or know a lot about Board of Educations and the way they work, but I've tried to do a little bit of reading, all right? And from what I've read, prior to referendum being passed, the state percentages are a preliminary percentage, which basically says they're determining that you're eligible for them, and that the final or guaranteed amount is generally not given or defined until after the referendum is passed. So my first question is, that state percentage, do you have that written as a final guarantee, or is that just a preliminary or eligibility for that particular amount?
That's the approved amount by the state.
Do you have that as written as a final guaranteed amount? Those are the words that
I don't have the document.
okay. All right. You can get that back to me, but just want the public to understand that that's the way it usually works, is they'll look at it and they'll say, we feel you're eligible for 40%, and that's pretty good. 40% on the renovations is a pretty good number. And then once the referendum is approved, a document will be received saying that this is the final guaranteed amount. So I think, to be fair and open to the public, we have to say that, yes, that number could go anywhere between $128 million and $169.9 million. So if you're right with your impact to your taxpayer, it could be $308 for an average $245,000 home, or it could be $448. So it's somewhere in that mix, just, again, for total transparency. Second question that I have for you is, how many years was the payback used in this calculation? I think I read somewhere that it was 30 years. Is that correct? So again, you'll be paying that amount every year for the next 30 years. Now, do you have you secured public bonding for this for 30 years? Or are you going to be looking for a private organization to bond it? I know you have a bond council. Are you going privately, or is there a public organization that's committed to this?
They'll make that determination after the referendum.
All right, well, my question is, I don't know if there is a public organization, but that would grant you 30 years. I only know from the city's perspective and our financial advisors, no one is providing bonds at more than 15 years. No one. So if you don't have this lined up, folks, that $308 to $448 is going to go from $600 to $900 a year. If you don't have it, they're not selling 30-year bonds. If you've done your homework, they're not doing it. city got that feedback. In other words, when we go to bond, our financial advisors tell us 10 to 15 years, you're not going to get more than a 15-year bond. No one's doing it in the market. You know, there used to be, years ago, there was an organization by the state that provided some long-term bonding. I know as a city, if we do sewer work, there's a special organization because they want you to do sewer separation so we can get. I don't know of any currently, I'm not an expert on the Board of Ed, but if you have someone out there that's committed to give you a 30-year bond, I think that information is critical that you get that information to the public. Okay, where was I in my notes? All right, student population. Steph touched on this. You know, we asked for re-registration and we were promised that it would be done by November 15th. Again, it's frightening to me that you've been working on this for 5 years and never thought to do a re-registration. How many haven't responded? It was due November 15th. Is it 20 that haven't responded, or is it 2,000? Because it makes a big difference. We had our last meeting a few weeks ago. We asked that question. There was all representatives from the board. There was representatives from the administration. No one at that table could answer that question. That is also frightening to me, because those are the folks that are proposing this type of a huge investment by the city. You talked about numbers and about the growing population. Graciously, the superintendent of school provided me with information about student populations by grade over the past number of years. Let's just talk about the lower grades. Looking at ECDC and grammar. Absolutely right. From 2011-12 through 2015, we had a spike in our grammar schools. And again, that's working its way through the system. Think about it, right? You're in 3rd grade, you're going to go to 4th grade, you're going to go to 5th grade. What you need to look at is what they're projecting is based on the fact that that is going to continue, when in fact it hasn't continued, it hasn't even remained stable. If you look at in total, again, taking the analysis of the numbers that I was provided by the superintendent, if you take ECDC and all 4 grammar schools, it peaked in 2015. If I take 2015 numbers and compare it to the 2018 numbers for those same grade levels, the enrollment is down by 154 students. So it's not continuing to grow, it's leveling off, which makes sense when you look at the rest of the country. When you look in general, geographically, unfortunately, with the cost of things today, families are not as large as they were years ago. So the numbers that we're seeing here actually do make a lot of sense. Do they make sense for a $101 million school? I'm not 100% convinced of that at this point in time. Sending districts. We talked a lot about Maywood, and I understand Steph's concern, about supporting recreation. Let me tell you a story. Do you know that years ago, way, way long ago, Maywood sent their kids to Bogota to school, right? And one day Bogota said, Maywood, we're getting crowded, and we can no longer afford for you to stay here. And Maywood found a new home and found a home in Hackensack, right? Bogota didn't ask their residents to build a new school. They encouraged the support of saying, let's handle what we have in a meaningful, economical way. Maywood is trying to leave the system, and we're fighting it. I just don't understand it if we're really as overcrowded as we're saying. Redistrict if it's needed. People don't like it. People don't like a $101 million bond either for the school. So maybe we need to redraw the lines. We need to really look at things. And before we bite the bullet for this new school, let's make sure we're doing the right thing. Before this $100 million on a new school is spent, let's look at all of the options. Show us some alternate plans. And that's kind of what the planning board asked for. It's much cheaper to build a pre-K than a 7 to 9. I mean, there's options we can look at. The planning board had concerns. I'm on the planning board as well. They documented those concerns. None of the planning board's concerns were addressed. One of the biggest concerns with the planning board is the loss of the field where we're taking a pervious surface and creating an impervious one in an area that floods. All right, so there were substantially others. I'm not going to iterate them all. You can go look up the minutes if you'd like to read them for yourself. But again,
they weren't addressed. They were asking for options. And I'm going to give you an example. Someone here, I think it was Regina, someone brought up the M&M building or us doing recreational things. When we present, the M&M building was estimated at $8 million, so we're not even in the same playing field. But when we went to planning board, folks said, we want another option. What did we do? We were ready to start construction, yes? We stopped and we said, let's do another, let's listen to the planning board, which is the voice of the residents. Let's do a feasibility study. Let's look at another option. We did it, and it wound up, the location we'd chosen was still the best financial, and it was the most appropriate solution. But we went through the exercise. We listened to what they said, and we followed it. None of that happened here. City had concerns that haven't been addressed, mainly because the Board of Ed did not share this information with the city until it was too late to change it. They'd already been 5 years downstream. Right? In early 2016, I initiated a meeting with the Board of Education, primarily to talk about where we were, because the concerns of what we were paying Padre Pio at that time was a little bit alarming to us. Right? I sat through that meeting with Board of Ed members, Superintendent of Schools, who's no longer our superintendent currently. We talked about some ideas the city had. Repeatedly, the message from the Board of Ed throughout that entire meeting was, we have our plans and we're not ready to share with you. That was the comment. If you had shared this with us in 2016, we could have hopefully worked together and not be where we are today. When we were able to share it with us, it was too late. Your own words, it's too late. We're too heavily invested to make a change. Again, I don't think it's the way we should be moving forward. All I know is that, yes, our schools were overlooked for a number of years. If the referendum had these multiple questions, our voters could have that input. All of the renovations, if I looked at your numbers, if I took alterations, renovations, if I just take out the school, if I took all of them, they're getting a 40% break, okay? And it is separate from each other because the school is only getting a 14% break. We could do all of that, and the impact to the taxpayer, instead of being $308, would be less than $108. I think everybody in this room would say, let's do it. Let's fix the schools, put the roofs on, put the windows in, do all of these things that need to get done. You would get that done. And it would be a little less than 108, because you're right, we wouldn't be able to retrofit for the pre-K. We'd take a breather. We'd get that done, and we'd take a breather and come up with a great plan for what we really need to do the best we can, not only for our children, but for our taxpayers and residents here in town. The mayor asked for a delay. I saw it on the newspaper. It was too late for a delay. If this referendum is not approved, it's not over, folks. It just means that the public wants a better plan. It gives the Board of Education an opportunity to go back to the drawing board and address these issues, come back with meaningful information, and let's do it right the first time. Let's do it together, not just the Board of Ed and the city. The Board of Ed, the city, the residents, the kids, let's do it together and get it right. Thank you.
Okay, it's no question that the best thing that we can do for the kids is education. And for me, that's very important. But, for instance, I own a house that was built in 1916, so it's over 100 years old. And I've been fixing the house, the roof, the siding, the boiler, but everything by priorities. There's no way that you're going to go and take a house and you're going to do the roof, the window, the siding, the boiler, the kitchen, and the top of that you want to buy a brand new car. Never happened. So I'm going to be simple because they already explained what is the reason we don't really support this referendum. And to me, in the way it's being presented, there's no way that I'm going to support it. I would like to see emphasis and by priority. Thank you. That's it.
I'm going to take my mayor hat off for a minute. Put my other hat on, if you don't mind. And I'm going to leave the dais.
Do you have a conflict?
And I will speak from down here, if you don't mind. Because I will speak to you as a taxpayer and a citizen, which is what I am.
Want to go to the podium?
Sorry?
Go to the podium?
I can go to the podium.
Because we want to hear you.
I could have taken the mic to the podium. Haven't been down here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you heard a lot from our council members and some of their reasoning. And, you know, I came out last week in opposition to this being presented as it was. I am 100% in favor of renovating these schools. I'm 100% in favor of putting air conditioning in these schools, new windows, whatever they need. My wife's a teacher in these schools. She teaches in a classroom in June where it reaches 90 degrees, but she has to keep the windows closed because the Teterboro noise is so loud she can't teach. So she sits there teaching sweating kids who aren't paying attention because it's just too darn hot. So it's a matter of education, and that's important. We all know that. We all agree with that. What I don't agree with is the new school. But there's other troubling things here, and you know, I'd written a letter to, just to show you something here. On January 3rd, I wrote a letter to Ms. Marks. Thank you for your reply to my letter concerning the upcoming bond referendum on January 22nd. It's very disappointing to me to learn that you will not support delaying the referendum to allow people to vote separately on the badly needed improvements and upgrades that we all support. Many people, myself included, are not convinced that building a $100 million new school is absolutely necessary if Maywood's current efforts to remove their students are successful. There is little doubt the other sending districts will attempt to do the same. Also, you have not completed your re-registration program that will determine how many non-residents are attending our schools in violation of state law at a great expense to Hackensack taxpayers. Your reply also did not address my request for a copy of a cost analysis that has been done on the recurring expense of staffing and maintaining the proposed new school building. Now, this is one of the most important parts of this, because if the school's $100 million, they need 150, they said they need 150 new parking spaces. Some of them are extra for the high school. Some of them are obviously going to bring teachers from the other school over. But if they're adding 50 or 60 new teachers, the impact on the tax budget next year, on the school tax budget, will be tremendous. And that will be additional to this, whatever you're going to go up as it stands now. So that's a big, big, big hit. But one of the things that's, you know, there's a lot of oops going on here. We heard the oops about the interest. We've heard the oops about Maywood. And by the way, I have a letter here from the Maywood superintendent. Now, just for the record, the whole time this was being presented, it was being presented pretty much through the months as elementary, and Maywood wasn't necessary for the Maywood liaison to be there because it didn't involve Maywood students, because it was for lower grades, all right? Then somewhere around the 10th, 11th hour, that all changed to go to a 7, 8, 9 school. So Maywood had actually no input at any of these meetings, from what I'm being told, on what's happening with their students. None at all. So that's an interesting fact. And they should have it, because now an eighth grader in Maywood is going to graduate school and go to school again and graduate again in 1 year, in 9th grade. I don't know if I'm a Maywood parent if I want that to happen to my kid. That's not the usual format. But anyway, I found it probably one of the biggest oops today. Oh, the other question, and take demographics out of it, because demographics have changed throughout this whole region. Where, you know, almost every town around here is almost the same. Why are we not just, like Deputy Mayor said, asking the sending districts to look for another place to go to school next year? And then reconfigure from there. Padre Pio, sore spot for me. And should be a sore spot for the Board of Ed, because the Board of Ed is the one who rented this school for $700,000+ a year for a building that's worth about $4 million. So in 5 years, we have paid off the Archdiocese building for them. Now, I wish I could rent my house out for 5 years and have somebody pay my mortgage off. It's a disaster, that building. And most Board of Ed members will agree with that. It's been a disaster. But it was done out of emergency, all right? But it really isn't an emergency. There was no foresight back in the day with the board to take care of this. And Mr. Cicchelli mentioned, well, we all have 2% caps. Well, bonds existed 5, 10 years ago, and we could have done something then. Nobody did anything. Nobody did anything. There were no bonds to maybe build a new preschool, nothing. And that should have been done back then. But the most annoying thing I found today, and this is the first day I know I was accused of seeing the ballot. This is the first day I've seen any part of the ballot. This was printed off my phone, or right off a picture. Never seen the ballot. But if you look at this line, and this is, and I'd like to know who approves the ballot. Is it the Board of Ed? Because there's a line in here, and you tell me what you think the number is. It says the average assessed home value is $245.431, which translates into an average tax impact of $308.66 over 30 years. What does that mean to you? That means it's costing me less than $10 a year. Right? Well, how misleading can we get? That's the ballot that you were going to get in the mail if you didn't do a mailer already. So somebody's going to say, oh heck, $308 for 30 years? I'm in. That's a disgrace. A disgrace that nobody caught that. And I just happened to be reading this going, oh my God. So how many oops are we going to allow on this? How many oops are we going to allow to happen? So, again, this should not go through. It should be voted down. They should come back in a month. Let's get these schools fixed like they should have been fixed for years and move forward from there. I'm not saying we don't need a new school. Maybe we need to do something, but it's definitely not a 7, 8, 9. By the way, the Consortium for Education United States will tell you 7, 8, 9s don't work for a bunch of reasons, mostly because of kids' age. 9th graders have gone through puberty. Most 7th, 8th graders haven't. It's not a good mix. So thank you for your time.
What are we going to do about executive session? You do it at the end? Should we go right into the meeting and do the executive session at the end?
All right, with that, I need a motion to go into closed session, please.
Can we delay it?
I don't particularly have anything that urgent for closed session. I don't know if Ted does.
Can we do it after the meeting so we can get, we'll do it after. 5-minute break and we'll come back.
All right, we take a 5-minute break, then we
Let's
come
close
back.
this
We'll go to closed session afterwards. Any motion to close the meeting, please?
Offer.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Closing the cow. Close the cow.
Close the cow. I need a motion to
Close the executive session.
executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Not opposed. Need a motion to
Close the cow.
the cow meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.